Hello and aloha po everybody. Time is 11:12. Today is 30th of April 2014. So we're back at it. We're going to have to discuss this book. Quite honestly, I'm kind of changing my mind to do this all the way. This is the book again. This book is called Gate to the Heart. It's written by Nader Saeidi. And I've done a critical study on the book. I did talk last night, a couple nights ago, about why am I doing this book. I hope Mr. Saeidi do not take this personal. I'm just doing as it falls in the jurisdiction of my responsibility as an elder of God to bring up some of the stuff that's happening in the Baha'i faith. This kind of books, this kind of a research, which is literally a handicap research, has not been done by the Baha'i means. It has created a shadow for a lot of youth, for a lot of young Baha'is, that they're proud of this book, and they think such books is the sign of the greatness of the Baha'i faith. So we did the introduction. I'm going to the first chapter, page 28. This chapter alone is enough to unravel what's happening with the scholars when they go study outside of the faith, and they come down and they think as a result of studying everything else but Baha'i faith, therefore they're the master of the Baha'i faith too. And this is what happens. Then the gentleman in this chapter, this is the first chapter, it says a short chronological list of the Bab's writing. He's trying to, create a glossary of some of the writing according to him. And he divides the writing of the Bab pertaining to the subject. What else could it be? That he says he's adamant and giving exact date to, that it starts with an interpretive stage. He likes to call it a stage. Then basically after 2 years, Bab let go of the interpretation and starts a new stage. Actually, he says on the previous pages the interpretation continued, but a new stage after 2 years started, which would be a second, as he says, philosophical stage. And this of course continues for another couple of years, and then a legislative stage starts. So he sees Bab, God, the Baha'i faith as 3 stages, where the revelation, it was about interpretations, and then it became philosophical, and it became legislative. Read some of it. It says, this section provides a brief annotated listings of some of the major or more frequently mentioned work of the Bab in a chronological order. In this study, 3 stages of the Bab's writings are distinguished by him. By him. The first interpretive stage comprises works written up to the middle of the first month of AH 1262 of the Arabic calendar, or January of 1846. So when the Bab starts in 1844 up until January in 1846, all his writings were about interpretations. Then he says the second philosophical stage consists of work the Bab wrote during the remainder of his stay in Shiraz and his 6th month of the residence in Isfahan, January 1846. It begins the second stage and continues to April 1847. He's adamant that after April 1847, a legislative stage in the Bab's writing started. Okay? And then he says, in the third stage, the third legislative stage, encompasses work written during the period from the Bab's departure from Isfahan for Maku in April of 1847 to his martyrdom in July 1850. So, according to him, from the inception of the revelation of the Bab, his writings are all about interpretations. And then after 2 years, it becomes philosophical, then it becomes legislative, meaning it brings Bab. Now, I do not know what is his intention of bringing these things up. Has he written this book himself? Has somebody else said this word suggested to him? Why would he divide the writing of the Bab in about 6 years? The first 2 years to be interpretation, and then the middle 2 years is philosophical, and the last 2 years becomes legislative, which is the laws and ordinances. Why would he say this? It is so obviously, so clearly this is wrong. Any Baha'i, I don't know, that knows anything about the writing or reading, I could tell you that. This is totally man-made, his made, who's made, I don't know. Now, he goes, this is very interesting, he goes, he says, some works of the first stage, that is in the page 30 of this book. And now he brings up the books, the tablets, some of it anyways, there's a lot more than that I know of. He says the first one is called Fi Suluk, on the virtuous journey to God. Okay, this is one of the tablets that Bab revealed before even his declaration. Now goes to the second one. The second one says again, Fi Suluk, same as before, on the virtuous journey, number 2, a second tablet on the journey to God. This work was written after the Bab declarations for the Abu Talib Husaynawi, and is also mentioned in the Kitab Fihrist, which means the index book of Bab. It unites the questions of it unites the questions of ethics and moral conduct with the idea of the spiritual journey by emphasizing the philosophical purpose of any action, namely seeking contentment with an acquiescence to the will of God. It discusses various types of contentment with regard to different aspects of life. Where does he get this idea that this second tablet in the Suluk that he's mentioning here was written immediately after the first one, or as he says, in the first stage, which is all interpretations? So let's go to find out, dig down a little bit to see where is this things coming from. It is difficult and mind-boggling at a time, but I have made myself few copies of what I'm going to say. Okay. There's a book written by Abdu'l-Baha. Ironically, he's a descendant of the Bab, a very great gentleman, a great historian, no doubt about that. But on the page 450 of his book called Ahd-e-Ahla, with the era of the Bab, Bab's era. The book was on the internet for some times. When it came a few years ago, I was smart to get a copy of it immediately for myself. Later on, the book was taken away. Okay. So, this book, as I said, this particular tablet, it is in the page 450 of the book called Ahd-e-Ahla. Mr. Nader Saeidi has gone without investigations on the fact why this tablet, even it is called Suluk, in the journey to God, no idea. But he has said that, as we read it in the book of Index, that Bab has revealed that book, he has mentioned a second tablet about the Suluk. And he has taken the word of Abdu'l-Baha that this is the second tablet, and he has borrowed it, plagiarized it for what he has said. Now, where's the actual tablet? This actual tablet, it comes in two places. If you go in the page 212 of a book called Tafsirul-Ha, a book, all the writing of the Bab on the Baha'i website, wrongly contributed to Azal, although the entire content says is the writing of the Bab. And Mr. Afnan also says this tablet is also in the INBA 98, and I have that page of the INBA 98 here too. When we read the tablet, this is what it reveals. وإنني أنا بحكم ما فصلت في نسخة علفين في تفسير الها ليبطل كل شبهات الحكماء. I, verily I, according to my explanation in the copies of the two books called Alifain, in the Tafsir al-Ha, in the explanation Ha. And I have checked to see that the same word is in here. Bab, His Holiness Bab says in this book, I have explained this already in my previous tablet called Tafsir al-Ha. Well, funny. In that case, this tablet is revealed after the Tafsir al-Ha. In that case, as he has mentioned himself in page 31, it would belong to the second stage of his own man-made idea about the stages of the writing. It is complicated, especially for the people who do not know. I'm going to have to summarize this one more time. As he explains, in the first stage of the interpretive, which is the second tablet, we just found out this tablet does not belong to the time that he's claiming to be. This tablet is revealed after a tablet called Tafsir-ul-Ha, interpretation of the letter H. Because Bob says, I have explained it. Therefore, it is not belong to the interpretive stage as he's believing himself. This would belong to the second stage of Mr. Nader Saeidi, a stage, his own made a stage, which would be few years after. This just tells us that the gentleman has not actually seen this tablet. Now, he's mentioning that, by the way, that, hey, listen, I'm not bringing these things from myself. I have brought this from a book that is called, this book is called Tafsir, Book of Fihrist, the Book of Fihrist in the index. On the Book of Index, the Bab, he does mention there is a second one. However, he does not, the way I have looked at it, Kitab al-Fihrist, he says Fassuluk, Aizan Fassuluk, again in the same idea. So the first one is Fassuluk, in the journey, about the journey, Aizan Fassuluk, again about the journey. That is why he thinks there is a second one, and this is the second one. The content of this tablet, if you read it in Arabic, it is not at all about interpretations or anything like that. Bab here goes after Muhyiddin Arabi, which is one of the greatest Sufis in Islam, who believe in the oneness of everything. And he actually, Bab actually criticized him very heavily. And the whole notion of the tablet is mostly philosophical, you know. So, therefore, this placement of the second tablet to be written right on the very beginning of the revelation of the Bab is a mistake by Mr. Nader Saeidi. So, now we look at the rest of it. The first one is Fassuluk, the second one is then also, the third one is the interpretation of the chapter of the Baqarah or cow. The next one is interpretations of the chapter called Joseph, Ahsan al-Qasas. And then after that we have Saifeh Makhzuniyeh, and so on. But I have to explain one by one. Fassuluk is not an interpretation. When we say interpretations, as Bab says, some of his writings are tafsir or interpretation, it means he's directly interpreting a full chapter of Quran or one particular verse of Quran or a tradition of Islam. So, if it is an explanation about an existing Islamic tradition or verses or a chapter, that would be called interpretation. Otherwise, it is not interpretation. If you're asking Bob what God is, then it becomes philosophical. If you're asking about the ascension of Prophet, then it will become philosophical. Interpretation meaning directly he's interpreting what was existing before. Fassuluk is not about interpretation. The second suluk, which he thought it is revealed after the first one, and I just proved it, it was revealed a couple years later, because Bab himself says, is referring to a tafsir called Tafsir al-Haq. Clearly it shows that it was revealed after that. It is not also about interpretations at all, but explanations to this guy about the matter of philosophical mistakes of some of the Persian and Muslim generally they made. The third one is Tafsir Surah Baqarah. Yes, this is Tafsir, no doubt. The fourth one is Tafsir Surah Yusuf, which is the interpretation of the chapter of Joseph. That is correct. There's no problem in that. Fifth one says Saifeh Makhzuniyah. This book is not an interpretation at all. This book is nothing but prayer. It's a prayer for different occasions, as he himself says. Saifeh Makhzuniyah, he says right here. Saifeh Makhzuniyah, hidden treasured epistle. This work was written shortly after the declaration of the Bab and consists of 14 prayers and visitation tablets. How do you then place this under interpretive stage? Because there's no verse of Quran or tradition or anything that has been asked to interpret or Bab is attempting to interpret. So that is a wrong classification of putting this tablet under interpretation. Then is Kitab al-Ruh. I have not seen this book. It is in the hand of the clutches of the Universal House of Justice and door researchers. They don't give it away. I don't know what the content is, but he says some of the content. I am 100% sure it is not about interpretations. Then we have the next one, number 7 is Tafsir Bismillah. That is correct, because this one in here, Bab is not interpreting the whole chapter, but just one verse called Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. That is correct, number 7. Number 8, Saifeh A'mal al-Sana. This is not about interpretation, nothing. He himself says. He says the epistle on the devotional deeds of the year. This work is mentioned in the Kitab al-Faris, written in Shiraz. It consists of 14 chapters and provides various prayers and visitations tablet related to the 12th month of the Islamic calendar. So that is not an interpretation at all. But yes, it is he placed it right here. Then we have, after that, Sahifi Bainul Haramain. Again, this is not about interpretation, but directly answering the questions of a couple of people that he saw them in Mecca, and they were not convinced, and Bab brings and answers them and talks about journey towards God and stuff like that, which has got nothing again to do anything with interpretation. And then number 10, Kitab al-Fihris, which is the indexical tablet that he says. This is absolutely not about the interpretation. Again, this work was written in Bushehr on Jamadi al-Sani, 15th of 1266, June 21, 1845, shortly after the Bab returned to Iran from Mecca. It recounts the story of his life, lists the work that he has written up to that date, and informs the believers of his decisions to withdraw from them for 5 years. Why is it then called an interpretive? Is it placed under the interpretive stage, his own making? Then after that, we have number 11, which is Sahifeh Razaviyeh, Epistle of Reza, pertaining to the 8th Imam. Same thing. This is no interpretations at all. Not at all. Number 12, he says here, Sharh Du'a Ghaibat, commentary on the occultation prayer. Yes, this is an interpretation, although the Bab's interpretation is a little bit different from anybody else. So when we look at it, in his classifications of putting these tablets under the interpretive stage, he's gone totally wrong. Especially when we get to the second stage that he says it starts January 1846 to the April, right in there. Now when we read about the tablets here, he's very adamant at when it starts. He goes like this. He says, it starts from Sahifeh Adliyeh, the Epistle of Justice, root principle. This work, sometimes also called Sahifeh Usul Adliyeh, on the fundamentals or root of principles of the religion, is one of the texts that announce, listen to this, that announced inception of the second stage of the Bab's writing. He's so adamant that when this Sahifa started a second stage, which is philosophical stage according to him, it began. It is absolute baloney. Because I'll tell you right now, as he lists himself, some of the writing of the Bab goes back again to interpretations. And then he has number 2, Sahifa Furu' Adliye, which is again, it is not about philosophical. This is not a philosophical tablet, which we have to understand now. What do you mean by interpretations and philosophy in the language of Bab and Babi revelation anyways? But this book is all about the deeds and commandment and ordinances and all the daily works that has to be done. It's got nothing to do with philosophical matter. Then, this is funny, number 3 says Tafsir Surah Kawthar, commentary on the Surah of Abundance. Now I want to discuss about abundance as a translation of Kawthar, which is not really a proper translation. But he brings number 3, the commentary, which means tafsir, which means interpretation of the Kawthar, because Kawthar is a very short chapter in Quran, and Bab has interpreted as what it means. He said it to Wahid Darabi when he came, he was the divine of the Shah, visiting him in Shiraz, and Bab has revealed this for him. So it is clearly about the tafsir, but he has put it into the second stage, which is philosophical. I'm asking him, what do you think the difference between the tafsir Surah Kawthar, according to you, has to be put into the second stage, philosophical? What is its difference from the tafsir Surah Baqarah, which is a chapter of cow, or tafsir Surah Yusuf that you have put it in the first? Why do you think that Surah Baqarah, chapter of Baqarah and chapter of Yusuf, Joseph, is interpretations of the first stage, but Surah Kawthar is philosophical? Yet it says tafsir, which means interpretation. How do you place this in this second category? The fourth one is tafsir Ha. Ha means H, letter H, because H stands for 5. 5 means B-A-B, Bab. And he wants to explain what it is. You could say that is philosophical. And the second tafsir of the Ha, which is philosophical. But again, it goes number 6, tafsir Surah Wal Asr. Wal Asr again is a chapter in Quran that the gentleman has put it into the second stage of philosophical, which is clearly an interpretations of the chapter, but he has put it in the second stage, his third stage. Then is the Risale Nabavat Khasse, which is about the proof of the prophethood of Muhammad, who say that's philosophical. Then tablet to the Mirza Said. Oh, this one, you may say, it's philosophical, a wrong word to call it philosophical, and I'll tell you why. And then finally, the 9th one, he says Risale Ghana, which is on the use of the music in Islam as how has to be done. So far we understood the gentleman, Mr. Nader, was created for himself with no authenticity from any source. That the first 2 years of the writing of the Bab was all about interpretation, and after that 2 years becomes philosophical. Yet he himself has mangled his own subject and has put some of the interpretation in the second stage. You see? Now, but there are a few things here. Before I go to the third one, I'm going to have to say this. In the number 12, of the first stage, he has this inventions of ideas. I don't know where is he getting it from and what does that mean exactly. But we have to read it. He says the Bab identifies occultation with the existential station of forgetting the divine revelation within. Do you understand, you English-speaking people, what does he say? The Bab identifies occultation, which means the period that the 12th Imam was in a grand occultation. He was not seen as the Shiites in Iran believe he's a hidden Imam. The time, the hiding times, that particular time, the occultation, he says the Bab identifies occultation with the existential station of forgetting the divine revelation within. Okay. He's trying to say that there is a divine revelation within us, but we're forgetting it. That there is a divine revelation within us. And he calls that an existential station. If I forget something about that I am, have some kind of amnesia, oblivion, you call that an existential station to that? What kind of a language have you been reading? What kind of a use you have for the words? The Bab identifies occultations with the existential station of forgetting the divine revelation within. The Bab is hiding, the Imam is hidden. That's what Muslim says. With Baha'is, we say there's no such things. It's just a man-made things. He says, how did he get from the writing of this book? I've typed this book. I'm going to print it. It's under printing. It's going to soon come right in their website. Where does in here, in this tablet, I'm asking him, Bab says the fact, the real meaning of occultations, which should have no meaning, will categorically say this is a lie. There has never been an occultation. There has never been no Imam even existing to be occultated or hiding. But then he says Bab identifies this fact of the occultation is that we're forgetting something within us. What does that mean? What are you trying to get? Continue on the sentence. Bab identifies occultation with the existential station of forgetting the divine revelation within, which requires prayer in order to regain true self-consciousness. I don't know. If these are the friends, who needs enemies? Who needs enemies with this kind of friends? He says that we're forgetting that the revelation of God is in us, and then we have to pray in order to regain consciousness. Prayer does not bring that at all in the Baha'i faith. You have to go through a lot of actions. It's a practical matter if you want to regain true consciousness. For that, Baha'u'llah has revealed the 7 valleys, that at the end of it you understand your true consciousness. But simply praying is not going to happen. But what is that got to do with the occultation of the Imam? Can he, by listening to this, or any one of you that listening to this, asking what is this sentence means? What kind of extrapolations of the writing have you got to say this? And then it goes, and in the last 3 chapters, the occultation praise interpreted. It is not. Actually, Bab, the name of the book is called The Interpretations of the prayer called Gaybat, written by the sixth Imam. Bab actually doesn't get into it, except a couple of parts of it. He says, Sulse dua, 1/3 of it. How does in the 4th chapter he goes to interpret the whole thing? Even the guy who wrote the book Bab, Hazrat Bab, the history, is a great historian again, Dr. Allame Hosseini. He himself says that Bab actually, although the name is the interpretation, but actually Bab does not get engaged to interpret these tablets, these prayers at all. But that's how Bab works all the time. Now, we're going to the 3rd stage. Now, in the chapter of 35, right here, he says now Bab starts to bring laws and rules. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. I have actually going to publish this book called Tafsir Surah Yusuf, which according to him belongs to the first interpretive stage. There are chapters here. Chapter 105, Suratul Ahkam, the chapter of the commandment, the actual law. Suratul Hajj, how to go to Hajj. Suratul Qital, how to go to jihad and fight. Lots of laws and commandments Bab has revealed on his very first book. How does he then put these things together to say that that is legislative? In the legislative, it says the first book that Bab wrote was Bayan Farsi. Again, he brings some kind of interpretations of himself. He says, in that part, both the form and the content of the book, form which means the legislative form according to him, and the content of the book affirm the understanding metaphysics of unity, in which all things are manifestation of an inner reality, which is the revelation of God within them. It is an extrapolation. When you say something like that, Mr. Nader Saeidi, this is huge when you say this, that Bab says in the Bayan. You would then have to bring some of the verses that complies with what you say, but you don't have it. Then Bayan Arabi is the second book of the legislative stage that he has. It says, written in the language of divine verse. I'll explain to you next time that Bab says my writings are, some of them he uses the word divine verse as he says, is ayat, he says. Some of them are munajat, means prayer. Some of them, he says, it's philosophical, is the pertains to the knowledge, to the wisdom, which in a true essence, which means the answers that Bab has given to the people that they asked him the questions. Those are answers of the Bab, which contains knowledge, if you can say philosophy, which would not be a right form. They have a different word for the philosophy. Philosophy in Islam is called wisdom. So, but he identifies the Bayan Arabi as a divine verse, as though the other writings do not have the divine verse in them. And he adds the Dalail Sab'e, Mandeloh Mullah Baqir, and Kitab Asma, and Kitab Panshan. These 3 stages that he has said these books are about legislative, especially Kitab Panshan, has got nothing with legislation. This book is a huge book, but there is no laws, no ordinances, nothing as such in this book. Of course, there's here and there always do's and don'ts, but it's not related to that matter. Kitab Asma, which is the lengthiest, biggest book of the Bab, few thousand pages I have typed myself, and yet is not its complete form, does not again pertain to any of the legislations. Number 4, the tablet to the Mullah Baha is not at all about legislations and legislatives and the rules and ordinances and anything like that. Bab simply tells him about the promised one that is coming after him. His classifications of calling the initial writing of the Bab as interpreted for 2 years, the second 2 years that it is philosophical and the last 2 are legislative, is his own made, is a wrong, and is not comply with the writing of the Bab, which we're going to see later on. And moreover, the gentleman has put these tablets in such a way that whoever knows it, he can see that he has mixed them up. There are things that he has put in legislative has got nothing to do with that. In fact of the matter, according to Nusratullah Husseini, is very hard to classify the writing of the Bab as they are interpretive or they are legislative. They are mix of everything. We simply call it tafsir or interpretation because the heading contains the one quotations from Islam in the form of tradition or a verse or a chapter that Bab tries to explain that. But while he's explaining, the chapter is not like your hermeneutic as he uses, like the classical way of the interpreters. Bab goes and speaks about everything else. Sometimes things that are not pertain at all, apparently, to the topic at all. So this kind of a classification is wrong, number 1. Number 2, the way he has put them in the different stages, that's clearly mistaken, wrong. Then he's thinking that the second chapter has been revealed after the first, actually is revealed after the tablet of the Ha, which we have to say the second Suluk is after the 9. It will be the 10th in the chronological that he says it will be the 10th one, not the second one. And I brought also the way that he says some of the meaning of this thing. I'll tell you another things, and I'm going to cut this down. It is really BS, the whole thing. Even talking about it is boring. He talks about the number 6, according to his division, it's called it philosophical, but yet its interpretation is number 6 is Tafsir Surah Wal Asr, commentary on the Surah of afternoon. You see this? Have I brought this in here to read this for you? Yes. Master Nader Saeidi, he just seems to be a pupil of Dennis McCoy. He's bringing this thing just like he does. He also calls the Surah Wal Asr afternoon. This chapter is a very small chapter. I have brought here from the internet some 10 right in here. I'm going to read it all for you if you want. None of these people on the internet that they have translated Quran, none of them has translated as the Wal Asr as afternoon. Asr in Arabic means time, but is not a identified beginning and end to it. For example, when you say week, we know it's 7 days. When you say days, 24 hours. When you say 1 hour, it's not. But when you say time, it's broad. We don't know if there's a beginning to it or end to it. Or you say age. Unless we say that Middle Ages, well, then we say, okay, there was something, sometime somewhere in Europe, Middle Ages, okay, or contemporary ages. But just like this, Asr means what? Time. Moreover, in the very beginning of it, it says Val Asr. This V in the beginning of Asr, V in the Arabic, it means and, A-N-D. But it also is an invocation. When you want to swear to God, you say Wallah. Wallah means I swear to God. You can also say Tallah, I swear to God, with the letter T. Or letter B, Billah, means also I swear to God. But this V is commonly used everywhere in the writing of Baha'u'llah. Wal Asr, then it cannot be afternoon. It has to be swear to afternoon. What is the tablet of Quran it says? It says Wal Asr. I swear according to him. Now the translation of Mr. Nader Saeidi, we have to translate according to him to see how funny it will become. Wal Asr, I swear to afternoon. Because he has translated Asr as afternoon. Wal Asr then means I swear to afternoon. Innal insana lafi khusr. Verily the man in it is at loss. The man is at loss in afternoon. What does that mean? It is clear that it's absurd to say the meaning of these verses of Quran. I swear to ask that man is in loss, ask then cannot be called afternoon. I swear to the afternoon that man is in loss. Man is losing an afternoon. What does that mean? This is clearly evident that the Asr does not mean afternoon. Asr, as it's broadly used by all the Arabs, it means time. Muhammad says, I swear to time that man is in loss in time. Yes, because we're all losing to time. Time will take us all, rich or low. That is what the verse is all about. So, the translations of many people here, it says, Abdu'l-Baha Muaddadi, by the time low man is in the state of loss. The second person, William Pechdel, Muhammad Marmaduke, William Pechdel, by the declining day, low man is in the state of loss. Abdullah Yusuf Ali, very famous again, by the token of time through the ages, verily man is in loss. None of them says in afternoon. Then by Wahiduddin Khan is another one. He says, I swear by the passage of time that man is surely in a state of loss. This is the best translation. Another one, it says Sahih International, which is the international corrected one. It says, by time indeed mankind is in loss. Talal Etani, by time the human being is in loss. Okay. Another one. By Al-Asr, within bracket, the time verily man is in loss. Muhammad Taqiyuddin Hilali and Muhammad Mohsen Khan translated. Another translation. By the time verily man is in loss. Abdul-Majid Daryabadi. By oath of this era of yours, dear Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, indeed man is surely in loss. It is Ahmad Raza Khan translated. And another by Ahmad Ali, time and age are witness, man is certainly at loss. Everybody says, well, Asr means age means time, except A.J. Arbery. It's not an Arab, apparently. It's a Christian. He says, by the afternoon, surely man is in the way of loss. 21 of them, they say that. Asr means the time, by the age, not by the afternoon. Because Persian usually, they use the word asr as afternoon. Arab could use that too, asr. I see on asr means I see an afternoon. But this is one of its meaning. Its broadest meaning of asr definitely means time. In time, man is in loss. If you say in afternoon, man is at loss, it would be crazy because it has no meaning. It look absurd. Now, he's translating this from the writing of the Bab. Let's see what Bab says about this. The actual tafsir, which is a book about a couple hundred pages, and this tafsir was written, revealed to the request of the Manucher Khan Mu'tamad-ud-Dawla, who was an actual Georgian who was brought to Iran as a kid, and then he became the son-in-law of the king and the governor of Isfahan, where Bab was kept under him. And he asked Bab, I'm really truly born as a Christian and I don't believe in Muhammad and whatnot. So the Bab revealed a tablet called Nabavat Khase to explain to this Manucher Khan about the prophethood of Muhammad. And then there was an Imam Jum'eh at that in Isfahan who asked Bab, this is the correct way, if I said any other way, I meant this. That this tafsir was at the request of the Imam Jum'eh of Isfahan, which means the Imam, the guy who takes the conducted prayers in Jum'eh Friday. They call him Imam Jum'eh, means the leader on the Friday, where he stands at the first row to conduct a congregational prayer of the Muslims. He asked Bab about the meaning of this wal asr, what that means. So Bab, I have made that book into the word. He says these are some of the words of the Bab and the meaning of what wal asr means. He says, إن المراد بقوله إز ذكره والعصر يمكن في مقام التعويد بكل ظهورات العقل وشؤونات الفصل. He says, verily, the intentions of God in His word, I swear to time, it is possible to translate, to signifies to all the manifestations of God. That is the time when man is at loss, if they don't listen. Okay, that is what he says. Bab says, Wal Asr is the time, it is a reference to the manifestations, all the manifestation of God. Then he says in the second one, إن الإنسان لو يشاهد مقامات المبادئ لفي ليفسر في كلمة الوالعصر كل الأسماء الحسنى التي نزل الله في الكتاب إن المراد في مقام هو علي. If he says to look deep inside, you can interpret this word Walas, I swear to time, all the beautiful attributes of God that has been revealed in book, and that would signify Imam Ali, which is the successor of Muhammad. Okay. Then Bab, as he interprets these tablets, he goes on use the traditions that has been brought from the past by the Muslim scholars in order to complete his interpretations of this. And so he was not against traditions. This is what Bab says, a quotations. Bab uses this quotation. وفي الإكمال عن الصادق قال العصر عصر خروج القائم عليه السلام إن الإنسان لفي خسر. In the book Kamal ad-Din, Ikmal is the reference to a book where Imam Sadiq, he says, Wal Asr, swear to time, is the Asr of the Khuruj Qa'im, means the Asr of the manifestation of the promised one. Wal Asr means I swear to the manifestation of the promised one. It's got nothing to do with afternoon. Innal insan lafi khusr, the man is verily in loss. This is actually I found this in the Kamaluddin of An-Ni'mah. It's the book. It's the page 656. This quotation of the Bab in this interpretation is actually there in 656. There is another quotation Bab uses to explain, according to the Muslim scholars, what this means. وَلَقَدْ ذَكَرَ جَامِعِ الصَّافِي في تفسير السورة المباركة هذا وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. And verily it's been mentioned in a book called Jami' Safi, in the interpretation of this blessed chapter, this, that وَالْعَصْرِ, I swear to time, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, the man is in his loss. قِيلَ, it is been said. Even this guy doesn't say I say. He says قِيلَ, it is been said بصلاة العصر أو بعصر النبوة. He says it could be as a reference to the prayer of the afternoon, أو بعصر النبوة, or to the time of the prophet. So when we look at it, the Bab does not say the translation of Wal Asr is afternoon himself. He says it's either Ali, but it says all the manifestation of God. But he brings traditions from the Muslims to say that Asr means the coming, the return of Qa'im, or Asr Nabuwwah, the age of the prophets, or the prayers in the afternoon. So it's a small reference to that it could also be the prayers in the afternoon. Out of all of these things, Nader Saeidi has taken, throw aside every one of them, follows his compadre, Mr. Dennis McCoy, and he translates his translation that this Asr means afternoon, because that Aubrey, some Christian, has translated to be afternoon, whereas 20 others translations right on the internet, none of them agrees with this Asr to be translated as afternoon. And then further, in the book of the Bab, Tafsir, interpretations of the chapter of Joseph, there is 111 chapters in it. One of the chapters, ironically, is called Wal Asr. In that chapter, Bab again says, Al Asr, it is my time. He says, Wal Asr innal mushrikeen lafi sakrat al-bod. And hadha al-bab laqad kanu min ghayr al-haqq mabhuta. إلا الذين تابوا وعنابوا إلى الباب من هول النار خزعا على الحق محمودا. So Bab says, verily, the Wal Asr, it is a reference that the mushrikeen, means those infidels, are all of them drunk in the drunkenness of the bod, means remoteness. And the remoteness, they're all in the remoteness from me, from this Bab, in where they are mabhuta, they are wondered, bewildered in their drunkenness of their mind. Except those, he says, they. So what I'm trying to say is that this reference that I just said, in the one of the chapters of the book of Surah Yusuf, Bab has actually translated, has interpreted in a very short way. So finally, we cannot classify the writing of the Bab in any shape or form. I've said before, the writing of the Bab is like a water pouring into the top of the waterfall. It is constantly changing. There is no way that you can use the best camera to take a picture with a very good high definition of the picture of the water, because the water is moving. It's against the Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principles. It won't work. The same applies to the writing of the Bab. So, when Bab calls something interpretations, he says there's 5 modes for his writings. One of them, he says, is tafsir. It is only and only a reference to a quotation used by him to explain a tradition or a verse or a chapter of Islam. Such writing would be called tafsir or interpretations. But the content of it is not. Content of it, it could be philosophical. It could be prayer. It is divine verses. Everything is in it. It could have some historical account. It is very, very difficult. Impossible, in fact. It is not designed to be so. Because I mentioned last night, the writing of the Bab is the greatest example of the creation of God. Just the way God made all these mountains, none of them geometrical, signifies any of the geometry that we know. None of them are exactly circle or rectangle or oval, none of them. Jig-jag of all kinds in the nature. Same is the revelation, which is the revelation of the Bab. This is what it is. You cannot classify. And his classification, he's gone very, very huge error he has made. Especially some of his extrapolations of the writing is totally out of whack. But with the apology to him and others, I do not intend to hurt you guys or any shape or form even to criticize you. What I'm saying is the bare fact. You entered in some place and you brought something with you, and I'm looking at it and I'm telling you this is what it is. All right? We have to use the writing of Baha'u'llah and Bab to find this explanation. Allah Hapa, till next time.